Alrighty, hello. I see we've got some folks joining the lobby here. We're going to give it just a minute or two, let folks hop on, and then we'll get started. Thank you all for joining us for another installment of Grow With Us, brought to you by Dallas Public Library, Seed Library, and Dallas Environmental Quality and Sustainability. So I'm just gonna give it a minute or so here. We'll let some more folks hop on. I hope everybody's enjoying this beautiful day today. Let's see here. Okay. Get a few more people hopping on. So I'll just kind of kick it off with some basic announcements about the how this presentation is going to work. We are live streaming today on YouTube. This is also being recorded, and it will be stored on Dallas Public Library's YouTube page. So if for any reason, privacy reasons, you'd rather not possibly show up on a YouTube video, go ahead and make sure to turn off your video. And then second, there will only be a handful of us who have the ability to speak, whose microphones will be on. The rest of y'all should be muted. If for some weird reason you're not muted, please do go ahead and turn your microphone off. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to drop those into the chat, and we'll make sure that we get to those during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. And so now, without further ado, I'm going to pass it on over to Judy with the Dallas Environmental Quality and Sustainability. Judy?
Hello, how's everybody? And this is such a great opportunity to kick off Earth Week, my goodness, because Earth Day is Thursday. So I'm really thrilled to be here, and thank you, Preston and Vanessa and Davis and Jordan. We're just pleased to be here and to have this section start things for us this week. We have a really robust lineup. On Thursday, we have the Earth Day Everyday program, and it's going to be about the CCAP. That's the Comprehensive Environmental and Climate Action Plan that the city of Dallas approved last year and has been working on this entire year. And there's all kinds of elements that have to do with, of course, the air, water, conservation of all types, urban agriculture. There's many different green buildings. There's many different segments. So please come back in on Thursday and join us for that. And then we also have an Earth Kid. So if you have any kiddos, the younger kiddos, there's the Bon Tom Farms. It's all going to be about chickens and just how sustainability can come into your life in unexpected ways, like raising chickens is definitely part of that. So today we have a program that we're very excited about. It's regarding roots and fruits, selecting, planting, and caring for fruit trees. And of course, we all know we just came through this terrible ice and cold. And I know that some of my neighbors have very heartbreakingly had to go ahead and cut down some of their younger fruit trees or prune them. And so this is so timely because I think many of us are in the process of trying to, see what we can save, how we can help all these wonderful green things that are in our landscapes and in our yards. And so I want to introduce our speaker today. We're very pleased to have Preston with us from, hold on just a minute, I just lost my place. Sorry about that. So Preston Williams, and he is an East Dallas native, and he studied horticulture at Texas State University after a stint in the Marines. So he has a big variety of experience. He dabbled in farming and was a horticulture manager at the Dallas Arboretum before joining the city of Dallas as the Northeast District arborist for the city. So you can imagine this, just how much experience he has, having traveled and then worked at the Arboretum and all the things he's done. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Preston. And thank you so much for being here, and teach us all you can about the trees and what we need to do next to help them. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation and turn off my camera. All right. Good morning, everyone. As I was introduced, my name is Preston Williams, and I'm a arborist for the city of Dallas, and I'm a certified arborist and degreed horticulturist, so I have a variety of experience. And I wouldn't call myself a fruit tree expert, but I'm happy to do a kind of brief overview of introduction to the world of fruit trees, and hopefully some of y'all can take that and run with it. So I named my presentation Roots and Fruits, Selecting, Planting, and Caring for Fruit Trees. And I called it Roots and Fruits because if you don't take care of your roots, you're not going to get any fruits. And a lot of people overlook that aspect of the tree. So with selecting a fruit tree, there's a few different things to consider. First is the location of where you have available to plant your fruit tree, and then what variety of fruit tree you'd like to plant. And then the production is in the method that fruit tree was grown. Different types are available, different types of years. We'll get into a little bit more of that later. And I found this little diagram that shows kind of a tree planting zone in front of a house. And one of the benefits of fruit trees, they tend to be smaller, 20 to 30 feet tops. And they can be a good option for planting out in that kind of utility zone out in front of the house where you can't fit in a big canopy tree. So you still, depending on the height of the utilities, you might not want to plant directly underneath it, but the only line that you need to worry about, the line you need to worry most about on the utility is the very top one. That's the energized high voltage. The lower ones are typically just telecommunication lines. And so that's not the ones that Encore prunes around, it's that top line. As for location, here in Dallas, we're in Zone 8A, which is kind of on the northern region of Zone 8. And the USDA hardiness zones just show, they indicate the average lows annually for that area. And as we're well aware, we can get a lot lower than 10 degrees. So it's good to keep that in mind when you're looking at the cold hardiness of the trees that you're selecting. Because while most years they would be fine, we could have a year like this one where it zaps everything. Another thing to consider is the required chill hours for the tree. Chill hours are the number of hours between 32 and 45 degrees in a year. And Dallas usually has between 750 and 850, but there can be years that are way lower than that and years that are way higher than that. So that's just a general range to consider. And most fruit trees will require full sun, which is at least 6 hours of sun a day. Some can tolerate some part shade, but they're not going to be as healthy and productive as they would be in full sun. And also soil with your roots is one of the main components. And the characteristics of soil you look at are texture, pH, and fertility. Now I can get into a little more detail on those later. As for varieties of fruit trees, most fruit trees are grafted, which means a cutting is taken from the fruit tree that you want and basically just jammed into a rootstock that's more mature. And so that way you kind of get a jump start on this little clone. And then the rootstock can also offer added benefits, like it might be better adapted for the soil or moisture conditions for that region. But also some rootstock can result in a dwarfed height of the fruit tree or a larger fruit. So that's usually not something, on the retail side that you have a whole lot of options on. But with going to a tree farm or a more specialized fruit tree nursery, they might offer different rootstock options. And then another thing to consideration is the pollination requirements. a good amount of the fruit trees can self-pollinate, but the biggest one to worry about is apples and pears, typically, and apricots can require a second tree to cross-pollinate so they can be more productive. Some of them can self-pollinate to a certain degree, but when you're looking at certain varieties, that's something to consider, because if you just plant one apple tree, you might never end up with any good apples off of it. As for production, there's three main classifications that trees are grown in nurseries. The most common one that you'll deal with at a garden center for a small fruit tree would be container grown. And most of them, they're grown their whole life in a container. Sometimes they start in a smaller one and get up potted, but they most of those have never been in the ground. And a benefit of that is they don't have to be dug up, so you get the entire root system intact. And another benefit is that they're generally available year round. And if you take proper care, you can get away with planting them nearly year round. There's naturally it's recommended to plant in the spring and fall before the weather gets too extreme, but you can usually get container trees year round. Next, we have bare root, which those are grown in ground, and when in the winter, when they're dormant, they're dug up and cured, and then they'll be wrapped and packed with a little sawdust or moss for shipping. And a benefit is, since they don't have that container with all that soil in it, they're a lot lighter, and that makes them a lot cheaper for shipping, and then that discount's passed on to the end customer. A drawback is, it's a little bit of a shock to the tree to dig it up and knock off all the soil and lose a lot of roots along the way. But you can it's a real affordable option. And then the last option is ball and burlap, which those are also field grown, but when they're dug up, they retain all the soil and just wrap them in burlap and wire. And the main benefit of the ball and burlap is that's typically where you're going to get your larger trees if you want that instant gratification of having an instant tree. But an issue is that it's a big shock to the tree. And then sometimes they're grown in drastically different soil. You know, they could be coming from the Gulf Coast area, and so it could be real sandy. And so that soil might not mesh well with our clay here. And another drawback is the amount of that transplant stress from digging them up and them having to regrow their root system after they're planted is they can be stunted for a couple years, whereas the container grown tree is less shocked and can almost catch up with that ball and burlap tree. So you might get diminishing returns if you're going for that instant tree. All right, and here's the standard planting diagram from Texas A&M. And the general rules are planting or digging the hole 2 to 3 times the diameter of the root ball of the tree you're planting. And you want to keep the root flare of the tree, that's where the tree starts to widen out a little bit at the soil line. You want to keep that at least at grade, but ideally an inch or 2 higher. And that way it keeps the tree from kind of drowning or getting suffocated from leaf litter collecting on top of the base of it. And then also, even if you plant it an inch or 2 inches above grade, it might settle down a little bit over time. So you want to give it a little room to sink, because a tree can always grow its roots deeper. It's not going to jump up out of the ground after you put it in a hole. And another thing to consider while you're planting, which I'll demonstrate in a moment, is while you're backfilling it with the native soil that you dug out, to slowly water it in to get out any air pockets, because those will cause more settling. And once upon a time, it was recommended to backfill with amended soil and throw in fertilizer. People thought that would kind of help the tree acclimate and give it a little jump start. But the problem is especially with our heavy clay soil, if you make the environment in that backfill area too hospitable, the tree will just want to grow its roots right there and will basically essentially be in a big clay pot and not really branch out into the native soil. So you want to just use the native soil and keep it compact but loose enough to where the roots can grow, but you want to encourage them to grow out. And I can cover that a little more with the demonstration. And also root ball preparation. We'll cover that in the demonstration. Let's see. Yeah. And just some basic tree care. There's no real magic answer, silver bullet that applies to everything other than just as needed. So when you want to water, you just water as needed. So this time of year with if we're getting consistent rainfall, you can get away without watering too much. But if you do, and the best thing to do is just, check the soil moisture level with your fingers. You got a little moisture probe right there. And if it's dry, an inch, 2 inches down, you can give your tree a good deep soak. And really in the spring, early growing season, they can get away with just a weekly watering or less, depending on the rainfall. And what also helps with the moisture level is mulch. So after you plant the tree, adding 2 to 4 inches of mulch around it. It's just not burying the base of the tree, but around the majority of the roots, and then even where the roots are going to be growing. That helps retain moisture in the soil, and it slows down the rain as it's falling, so it can penetrate into the soil rather than just running off. And the mulch also helps prevent weeds that will compete the tree for moisture, because that St. Augustine can soak up a lot of water. And fertilizer is another really complicated question to answer, because it really needs to be tailored to the tree and to the soil that you're dealing with. So at garden centers, they often sell just a little at-home soil test where it just has a color gradient and will give you an idea of any deficiencies you have in your soil. But generally for fruit trees, you can just use a balanced fertilizer, which the numbers on fertilizer are the nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, NPK. And so it'll be 10, 10, 10, or 16, 16, 16. And some fertilizers will also just be marketed and labeled as being formulated for fruit trees, especially citrus trees. They have specific fertilizer. But, and then with fertilizer options, there's, you're limited only by your imagination. There's the synthetic liquid, granular, and then the pelletized or capsule slow release. And then there's all the different natural and organic options. With liquid fertilizer, since it's water soluble, it doesn't really retain in the soil too long. It just gets immediately soaked up by the roots. So that can require multiple applications during the growing season. And then granular is a little slower, and then the slow release is slower still. And then the slowest and my preferred method is just the natural organic. I make compost in my backyard and just use leaf litter for mulch. I just keep it real simple and natural. And then for pruning with a new fruit tree planting, the main thing you're going to be focusing on is a structural pruning to make sure you're setting it up for success and it has a good healthy structure, a nice strong central leader, and is perpendicular as possible lateral branches. But as they mature, you'll want to do some thinning to help with sunlight and air circulation to make sure the tree's not shading itself out and creating nice little habitat for pests and disease. And then also, especially if you have it out near your utilities, you might have to do some reduction cuts down the line to maintain your tree at a smaller height. And reduction pruning is pretty common on fruit trees as well, just to make them a more manageable size so it's easier to reach the fruit when you're harvesting. All right. Also, I listed a few resources if y'all want to do a little further research. So the Texas A&M Forest Service and the Extension Agency, they both have really good websites and with plant selectors on them where you can basically put in the parameters that you're dealing with and they'll make suggestions. And that they have plant selectors for everything from, grass to canopy trees. So, but they have a good selection of fruit trees on there as well. And then a local expert that I've met is Drew Demler out at the Big Tex Urban Farms. He's been working out there at Fair Park for I don't know how many years, and mainly doing vegetable production with this real cool hydroponic system they have. But he also has a bunch of fruit trees, and he's done some blogs and videos on fruit trees for North Texas. So he's a good resource to look up. And then the Texas Discovery Garden at Fair Park, they have a nice display garden where you can see some fruit trees in action and kind of get some ideas of what you might be interested in. And they also offer a spring and fall plant sales where you can get some real affordable trees as well as shrubs and ground covers. And they specialize in native and adapted plants. So they're real big on pollinators and everything. Also, there's the Texas plant guy, Daniel Cunningham. He's got a lot of online videos and resources, and he's also a local fruit tree expert. He's real big into planting fruit trees and then just foraging in our food forest. So he's got some good videos on that. And then also I just recommend that you support your local garden centers and nurseries. After these last few years, a lot of them have been hit pretty hard by the wild weather we've had, so they could use all the support they can get, especially North Haven. They got direct hit by that tornado, so but they're fully operational. So I recommend getting up there and checking out what they got. They have very knowledgeable staff as well. Okay, that ends my my presentation portion. I'm going to do the oops, let me exit out of here. I'm going to step outside for the demonstration portion. Let's see, y'all still with me?
Yep, we're still here.
All right.
Thanks so much. And just for the people in the who've asked the questions in the chat, we'll get to those after Preston does his demonstration, because it may prompt some even more questions after seeing
yes. Okay, now if we could switch, can we switch over to my other device?
Okie doke. Let me see. All right, I'm gonna pass the camera off to my lovely wife.
All right, y'all got me?
Yeah, looks good.
All right, for my demonstration, I'm gonna be planting a little apple tree that I didn't practice what I preach. I picked this up at Lowe's, time crunch. But as I mentioned earlier with the diagram, I dug my hole about 2 times the diameter of the root ball, which it doesn't look as much, but you got to add that plus that equals 2 times. And then also the tree came with a handy little diagram on it. That's a nice simplified version. And another thing, which I'm glad they called to attention, is if you don't know where your utilities are, be sure to call 811 before you dig, so you don't, run into a water or gas line and have a big problem on your hands. But since I've done several projects in my yard, I'm familiar with my utilities, so I didn't need to do that. And so we got the hole dug, and we got it just about at or above grade. And it's easiest way to check that is just lay something flat across the hole so you can see where the level is. And just following the order. And then now you can use the backfill to build the water basin and backfill it and add water as you go. But before that, and often overlooked step, is preparation of the root ball. Oh, here's a good learning opportunity. So it's best to pull the tree out to measure the required depth before you pull it out of the container, because as you can see, they put this in a much deeper container than the root ball was. But we can mix that in to the backfill. And you want to go around and check for any circling or girdling roots that need to be pruned off. Because if there's a root that's growing around in a circle, it'll just keep doing that and it can eventually strangle the tree's roots. But this one looks pretty healthy. It looks like it was pretty recently placed in this larger pot, so the roots aren't circling or too root bound. It's like it's a nice healthy root system. All right. Sit stuck on the bamboo. So also you want to make sure to remove any tags or tape that's going to restrict the growth of the tree. And this is a small enough tree that it won't need the stake. That was more so just for while it was in the container. And then tree. Also, if the tree has any suckers like this one is coming from below the graft line. So this is just going to be from the root stuff. This, we don't even know if this is ever going to be capable of producing fruit or producing fruit that's worth anything. So I'm going to go ahead and pinch these off. I don't know. The suckers can help add to the photosynthesis of the tree, so it can help it get established. But I'm gonna go ahead and pinch them off. There's different schools of thought on that, but they don't add enough benefit to justify it. A little well. And like I was saying earlier, it's best to err on the side of being too high than too low. And you want the base of the hole to be nice and compacted and firm, so it doesn't settle too much. And the roots aren't going to grow down so much as they're primarily going to grow out. Most roots are within 6 to 12 inches of the top of the soil. All right. Looks like we're ready. Backfill. So I'll start putting a little water on it. And using a tarp for your backfill soil is nice, because then you're not trying to dig it out of the grass or whatever your ground cover is. Nice and firm, but not too compacted. Just water as you go. Try not to include any of the grass. That'll take hold. Yeah, and since I want my tree to get acclimated to that native soil, I did the backfill all just with the native, and then I'll just use that excess that was in the container as mulch. And then it's nice to kind of make a little raised ring around the edge that'll help catch and retain moisture and help it percolate into the soil. You want to make sure your layer is nice and exposed. All right. I don't have too much of a tree ring, but I'm okay with that. And then I just have some partially composted leaf litter in the backyard that I'll use to mulch it in. All right. It's good enough for me. And then you can see it's a little crooked. So while you're planting, it's good to step back and adjust it as needed. But they still have a bit of clay in them just after you plant them. And it's best to do a 90-degree offset. You can see it straight both ways. It's good. One last order. All right. And as far as pruning, this one, if you want to get a close up over here, you can see someone in the nursery was taking pretty good care of this one. You can see there was a co-dominant stem here that was competing with this one, and they went ahead and snipped it off because that would have been a weak branch union that would eventually split down the road. And yep, it's got a pretty good structure. I'll let it go with that for now. And then, as I was mentioning earlier with pollination, this is an apple tree, and this variety specifically requires a separate apple tree to pollinate of a different variety. So now I need to find a comparable apple tree that this one can be friends with. And I might, since I don't have a whole lot of room left, I might see if my neighbor wants an apple tree, and then that way our apple trees can be friends. But for another aspect of pruning is part of fruit production is you need to thin the fruit for a better harvest. So here's a little peach tree I planted a couple years ago. Got a little paper wasp on. But lots of times immature fruit trees will go ahead and self-abort all their fruit. So this one only had a few dozen fruit on it when it first set, and it's just got a handful left. But there is some good examples of where if I was going to let these fruit mature, I would want to thin them so I would get a better harvest. So the general rule is you want your peaches to be about 2 inches apart on alternating on opposite sides. So these two are right next to each other. And then this one wouldn't have room to grow. It would get wedged between those two stems anyway. So I'm just going to take that one off. And so that one has the better potential. And then now it's going to have more energy focused on that one fruit. And here's another example where there's two right next to each other. So I would just choose one. I'll just leave that one, take that one off. But since this is such an immature tree, I don't know if I'm going to leave any of the fruit on here to fully mature anyway, because I'd rather have that tree use all those nutrients and resources to grow him. So then that way I'll have a bigger harvest next year. So that's the general gist of fruit thinning. And it's on apple trees, the flowers are in a cluster of 4 or 5. And so sometimes you'll have 4 or 5 fruit all together and you have to thin it down to just one. And it's hard at first, but then after a while, you kind of get in the swing of it, just like pruning of any kind. And for structural pruning, the classical technique that's recommended for peach trees is to let them grow, to train them to grow in an open vase structure, or the way I've just described to me and the way I've done it is it's like an open hand. So you want the inside to be open, and you want all the branches to branch off and look like an open hand. So this one you can see has 1, 2, 3, 4, kind of 5 main branches. But down the road, I might either reduce this one down or take it out altogether to open up the inside so more sun and air can circulate and make the tree happier and more productive.
Those really look great, Preston.
Yeah. That's about all I got on that.
Yeah.
Let me see. All right. Well, that concludes my
Thank you.
presentation and demonstration. We can open it up for questions.
All right, you ready for your first question?
Yeah, let me turn up my volume.
It begins today.
Okay.
All right, so the first question is, which fruit trees can we plant into the ground instead of keeping containers in Dallas? Peach, examples they give are peach, apricot, cherry, avocado, Meyer lemons, or apples. So I guess the question would be because of the seasonality of them, or because some ones don't tolerate the freeze as well. Which ones should be planted in the ground, and which ones should be planted in containers?
Yeah, so peaches, apples, pears, apricots, plums. Those are all safe to be in the ground. Once they're established, they should be able to take a hard freeze, even like the one we had. They might die back a little bit, but citrus and avocados especially, yeah, those are very tropical and cold sensitive. There are some more cold hardy varieties of citrus, but even the cold hardy ones would be pretty stressed out from a winter like this last one. So yeah, so avocado, and for avocados, to keep them in a container long enough to where they're mature enough to produce just isn't really practical here, unless you have a giant greenhouse to keep them in over the winter. So I wouldn't recommend avocados here, but they're, especially the little Meyer lemons, they call them like patio citrus. They have dwarf varieties that are bred to be in containers that can be brought in for the winter. What else we got? Can y'all still hear?
Yeah, sorry, I had muted myself again. I apologize. So
Okay.
if you do have the trees in containers, how often should you water them? Like a lime tree. So if they're in containers, do they need to be watered more often?
Yeah. So
in-ground tree.
Yeah. So trees in container will need to be watered much more often than in the ground. And yeah, but similar with the ground, you can just kind of check them by just using your soil probe, and if they're dry, give them water. If not, let them go. And yeah, especially with containers, it's good to err on the side of letting them dry out a little bit between waterings, so it doesn't promote any fungal growth at the base of the container.
And Preston, when you're establishing a new tree, it's basically about 2 years, right? That you need to kind of monitor that moisture and make sure
Yes.
they have enough, especially during these really hot months that we have ahead of us.
Yeah. Even mature trees, once you get into triple digits, they might require supplemental water, especially fruit trees, because fruit trees aren't really natural. They were kind of bred, they're kind of like chickens. They were bred to be like this really fruitful, unnatural thing that's not really sustainable on its own. It needs our help.
Oh, thank you.
And then we have a question about one of my favorite fruits, persimmon. And they want to know if persimmons are a tree or a bush, and if they do well, and if they have lots of pests. And I think it probably depends on if it's the native persimmon versus the Japanese persimmon.
Yes. Yeah. And so there's the common persimmon, then there's the little Japanese persimmon, and then there's the Texas persimmon that actually have one of those, which it doesn't look or taste anything like the regular persimmons. But yeah, they in the right conditions, they can do really well here. But yeah, they're very sensitive to overwatering. So if you do plant them in the ground, you might need to amend the soil with some sand to help with drainage, and also just keep them in a container as long as you can, because the Japanese persimmons are there's some more dwarf varieties that you could keep in a container.
Yeah, this is Judy. My neighbor has 2 on the east side of the house. So it's kind of a sloped area. So I didn't realize that they were susceptible to moisture, but that could be why he has them kind of planted on the sloped area, but they do very well. They bear fruit every year, and they're quite beautiful also. It's a real nice canopy, a real luscious looking leaf.
Yeah, they're beautiful trees. A really low maintenance one that I recommend is the pomegranate. If you have a really hot, like full sun spot, they can do great in it. And my neighbors, it died back a little bit from the freeze, but it looks like it's going to be just fine.
Since you mentioned pomegranates, let me go ahead. I'll skip ahead to that question because someone asked since their pomegranate looks dead after the super freeze, how long should they wait to remove it? And do you think pomegranate trees will survive after the freeze? Do you think they'll bounce back?
It could survive. I would still wait, because I have shrubs and trees that are just last week, they finally put on some new growth. So I was going to cruise over to my neighbor's house and check out her little pomegranate. Yeah, and it is possible it might have died all the way back to the ground. So I would keep an eye on the base and see how this one is all suckering out from the base. So, but it looks like this one survived up top, but it was also sheltered right on the house. So the kind of microclimate there might have protected it a little more. But I would still give it a little time. My figs just now sprouted, so I thought they were goners.
Does it help to give them an extra boost of nutrition, of some type, or fertilizer, natural, new compost, or anything like that at this time to help them?
Yeah, a liquid fertilizer right now that's high in nitrogen would help them recover a lot of that soft tissue they lost. So, because a lot of the sensitive fruit trees, they probably won't have much of a harvest, if any, this year. But so now we're just need to focus on recovery.
I see.
All right, and you had such good information in your slideshow presentation. Someone asked if it's possible that we could send out a copy of your presentation as a follow-up to the.
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay.
I'll send that to you.
All right, awesome. Thank you. And so there's a question about the root flare. If the root flare isn't visible in a container, should soil be removed so that it's visible to determine the correct planting depth?
Yes. And yeah, when you're working with the root ball, obviously don't just like brutalize it, but you don't need to be shy. I've even planted trees where I could tell the growing medium that they were in, just it would be a problem because that root ball, since it's totally so different from our clay, can dry out. You can completely remove all the potting soil to where it's just roots. You can just kind of gently tap it and get everything off, and then backfill it with all the native soil. And that way you can really clearly see where the root flare is. But yeah, when in doubt, plant it high.
Okay, so that kind of segues into another question. Someone asked about if you ever recommend root washing where all the soil is removed from around the plants before planting. That's kind of what you're talking about right there, right?
Yes. I've had really good luck with that. It's just more tedious and time consuming. So I think that's one reason why it's not highly recommended. But like I planted some bald cypress for erosion control in my backyard. And since they're kind of outside of my fenced area, they're going to be, zero maintenance. So I wanted them to be tough. So I went ahead and washed all that potting soil off of them. So they were strictly in the native clay. And that way, and they've already taken hold, and I don't give them any supplemental water, but bald cypress or cast iron, like they're pretty tough trees. So.
And there's also a question of whether the hole in the demonstration tree that you planted, if the hole should have been wider in that.
It could have been wider, but it was 2 times the diameter of the existing root ball. So you can go wider, and if you do go really wide, it doesn't have to be that same width all the way down. It can be more kind of inverted cone shaped, because the roots are going to go laterally, not down. So the roots are more going to grow out. But my front lawn it's a pretty good loam, sandy loam, and and I aerate the lawn, so the roots shouldn't have any trouble growing into the native soil there. But if you're dealing with heavy compacted blackland clay, it'd be good to go wider.
All right. And speaking of roots, should you use a root stimulator when planting new trees that come in a container, or even bare root? Do you recommend a root stimulator?
Yeah. I don't typically use root stimulator just because I'm cheap, but it can definitely help, especially with a bare root or ball and burlap, because they lost so much of their root in the transplant process. But with the container grown trees, it's less necessary, but it's helpful.
All right. And I guess you showed your beautiful peach tree. When should those typically be planted in the ground?
When should the peaches be planted?
Yes.
Yeah, just spring and fall. We're coming in on the tail end of spring, but if the tree's if it's in your front yard and you're going to see it and check on it and talk to it every day, and you can plant it year round, because you're going to notice it wilt the moment it wilts, because you're going to be looking at it out your window. The spring and fall planting is that's more strictly recommended for lower maintenance plantings. But if it's your baby in your garden, there's still plenty of time to plant.
All right. And you're talking a little bit about this when you're talking about your peach tree, but when should you expect the first crop from fruit trees? Like how many years does it take for most fruit trees to get a crop?
It varies from tree to tree. Peaches, by the time they're the age that they are when they sell them, they're already a couple years old. They'll produce right off the bat, not much. And then that's what I was saying, where it's kind of with the immature trees, it's recommended to remove all the fruit because that's a huge tax on the tree that they should be focusing that energy into growing the tree before they focus on the fruit. But with other trees, like apples are like 5 to 8 years before they start producing. And that's, if you're getting a little sapling, it's only a year or two old. So it's kind of a long haul. Same with pears, they take a few years. Trying to think. I'm not sure how long citrus take before they fruit. Because I don't have a whole lot of experience with citrus living up here. And then the experience I did have down in the valley, they were already mature. But it should be just on the basic, the tag for the tree, or if you just Google the tree, it should be pretty readily available information.
Awesome. And do you have any recommendations for self-pollinating fruit trees that are easy to grow organically, so not as susceptible to insects and pests and that kind of thing?
Peaches are pretty tough. Yeah, figs and pomegranates are really tough in that they don't have a whole lot of disease or pest issues, other than 4- and 2-legged pests that like to steal the fruit. But yeah, figs are really easy. And then they're also really easy to propagate. If you have a mature fig, you can just take a low branch and just put a rock on top of it down to the ground, and it'll root into the ground. Like they're as easy to propagate as some house plants. But yeah, for pretty guaranteed plants, I'd go with them. But also they're a little on the cold tender side, so it's a trade-off.
All right. And there's a question about how a Meyer lemon should be pruned. Should it be pruned by the same hand method that you showed as well, or?
Yeah. And they can be, and you can do all kinds of fun pruning techniques with them. But typically citrus just kind of have like an almost columnar shape where they're just like just a giant bush, or like a big holly hedge. So just kind of maintaining that shape, but you can get fun and artistic with it. They also, sometimes people do fun espaliers with the citrus where they have it grow flat along a fence or a wall. But then they don't need too much aggressive pruning though.
All right. And are there any like considerations you need to take in mind if you have a fence yard about planting a tree in the ground, if you have a fenced in yard?
I
guess
well,
maybe asking like how far away it should be from the fence, that kind of thing.
Yeah. In general, since fruit trees are on the smaller side, I would keep them 10 feet from pavement, from fences and structures, just at least 10 feet away. Because that way, that'll pretty much cover they'll tap out around 20 feet wide. So if they're 10 feet away on center, 10 feet from the trunk, that keeps you safe.
All right. And you mentioned squirrels, which are the bane of all gardeners, I believe.
Yeah.
Is there any way you recommend for protecting your plums and peaches from squirrels, like a covering or anything?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of different techniques, and yeah, I haven't seen any that I'm really convinced are surefire. Because I've seen like the little metal cones that you can put on the trunk to try to keep them from climbing, but they'll find a way. Yeah, I wish I had better advice on that, but I'm still figuring that one out myself.
Bob, in a previous one, had said that what he does is he feeds corn to the squirrels to lure them away from his garden. So I don't know, maybe a similar thing could work for the fruit trees. I don't know.
Yeah, that is a technique, just kind of a distraction. But yeah, then once even if you've had successful years, there can be one year where they just realize it and then they're all gone overnight. So
It's just a matter of watching your fruit trees carefully, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to put your son out there with the Red Rider, that might be the best.
Or plant 3 trees and then hope one of them is left alone.
Yeah, you have to have sacrificial trees.
And is there a way to tell if your pecan trees are healthy? The person said they could turn on their video camera to show you if you would like. I don't know if you can view cameras or not right now on your
Yeah, I
current
can.
setup.
Also, pecan
so-
trees they're the last tree to leaf out in the spring. So like mine are just barely leafing out. So if they're not fully leafed out yet, I wouldn't be worried about it.
Okay. And just someone just gave a tip for the squirrels. They have a pit bull puppy that likes to chase the squirrels away.
Yeah.
And also, I guess using dog or hair or mulch by the trees can help deter them also.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
It,
thanks for that tip, Yvonne. I haven't
it
thought about
looks
trying
like
that.
getting some footage of the tree there, the pecan tree. She's
Okay.
out kind of showing
All right, let's see if we can find that on the camera. Okay, so there's okay, that looks healthy to me. I'm not an expert though.
Okay, I got it. Oh yeah. Yeah, it looks fine.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Gorgeous.
Yeah, it might be time to have an arborist come out and do just a little kind of preventative maintenance. It's probably got some dead wood in it. Pecans are real bad about they kind of self prune. So, but sometimes they need a little help. Otherwise, you got just dead wood hanging, waiting to fall on you. But yeah, otherwise, it looks like a perfectly healthy pecan.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that. That was a beautiful pecan.
Yeah.
So someone asked about a sago palm, and is it safe to prune it all the way back to the ground right now? It's green near the ground, but the tops did not survive the freeze.
Yeah, so any of the dead fronds on there, they're not going to come back. So you can cut them off. And because the new growth just comes out of the center. And so as long as that center is still green and growing and not mushy, then you should be fine.
Awesome. And you mentioned that you aerate your yard. So someone asked how often they should aerate their St. Augustine yard that has lots of trees.
I just do it once a year in the spring. My yard isn't too compacted, and I just have the little manual aerator that looks kind of like a turning fork, but it has the little the tines on it are hollow, so it takes a little core out of it. But yeah, I just do that in the spring before it comes out of dormancy.
All right. This is also a question about they tried grafting onto their plum tree, but the branch died where it was grafted. Do you know what would have caused that, or a common error with grafting?
I regrettably don't have much experience in grafting, and I wish my grandpa was around to teach me. But yeah, I don't have any advice on grafting.
All right. So the person who asked that question, I'll try to see if I can find some good resources to include in the follow-up email about grafting.
Yeah, I want to, as I grow my fruit tree population, I want to start playing with grafting, but yeah, I'm still just getting started.
I do know, just briefly, because I'm in the Master Gardener program, when they talked about grafting, you do have to have that cambium layer in contact with each other on the graft. So I think if there's not good contact there, it can cause the graft not to take. But again, I'm not an expert, so I'll try to find some resources on that.
Yeah, I do know grafting is kind of like rooting out a cutting. It's not 100%, so you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So, like when I root out a cutting of something, I try to do, at least half a dozen of them, because I know they're not all going to take. So similarly with grafting, you want to do a handful of them in case one of them doesn't take.
And you said that peach trees were self-pollinating. Is that correct? So you only need one of them?
Yes. Yeah. So I have one peach tree, and it bloomed and set fruit all on its own. There might be varieties that require others, but I'm not aware. I think pretty much all the standard commercially available varieties are going to be self-pollinating.
Well, that is the end of the questions that I have. Although Wayne sent me a message that makes a good point. Is like there are no foolproof ways of getting rid of squirrels, or else we wouldn't have a squirrel problem in our garden.
Yes, they found their niche and they exploited it. They're good at what they do.
All right. So if there's not any other questions, thank you so much, Preston, for sharing all of your tree wisdom. And since Preston said he will send me the slides, I'll send those in the follow-up email along with some of the other resources that he shared. And so we'll get those all sent out to you. Yeah, thank you for giving us the intro into fruit trees. I know that's something that I want to get into more, so this helps.
Yeah.
This helps
Well, yeah,
answer some of my questions.
And I'm hoping to learn more as I go too. Happy to share what I know.
That's great. Thank you,
Right.
Preston.
Judy, did you
Thank
have
you,
anything?
everybody. Yes, this is Judy.
And,
Thank you so much. It was very, very informative. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, wonderful Dallas Public Library staff, for all you do to help make these programs possible. Have a great week, everyone. Happy Earth Day.
Yes.
Yeah,
and
happy Earth Day.
make sure to join us next. Make sure to join us next week. Let me put the link in the chat real quick. We're going to talk about square foot gardening, and Wayne will be sharing all of his square foot gardening wisdom, and he knows a lot. So if you're interested in learning about that, I put the link in there. Go ahead and register for that class as well.
Great.
All right. Thank y'all.
All right.
All right.
Thank y'all so
Bye,
much. Y'all have a
everybody.
wonderful day. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.